we can start with the show. So, welcome to the first Airhacks TV in 2025. It should be 130th edition of Airhacks TV, and today, because I announced the show very late, I think 3 or 4 days ago, we only got one official question. And the question is not even asked in the GitHub. Rather than, I copied it over from YouTube. Why? Because I was invited to the DevOps Stage conference, and I was supposed to pre-record a video, which I really don't like. So I prefer speaking live and interacting with the audience. But I pre-recorded a video, and I published the video as well on my channel, and got a very good question from Dempile about whether it only works on AWS. So we'll cover the question in depth because it's a good one, and maybe first what happened in December. So I delivered Airhacks Live workshop, and the workshop was about actually two. One was single table design, and the other one was about LLMs. And the single table design was how to have relations between objects in DynamoDB or Cassandra. And the LLM was, we started actually with basics, and then we spent a lot of time talking about enterprise integration of LLMs and also local model inference. So we run the models locally, completely with pure Java. And it worked better than expected. So I thought there would be not enough time, but it was. And what was actually the outcome of the workshops? The outcome was that Java is actually pretty well suited to run LLM inference, even training. And what I also used, an DeepL library from Amazon, which is used also at Amazon. And what we played a little bit with metrics, multiplication, stuff like that. So maybe I will record some videos about basic Java and LLMs and in 2025, because I get also some requests I should record longer videos, not only shorts. So shorts are fun, but my viewers are missing longer videos. So actually recording longer videos is actually easier than recording a short video, I have to say, because in short video, you have to be really to the point. Otherwise, you get a timeout. And in longer video, you can chat a little more like this, right? So this Airhacks TV is effortless for me. I just can talk and interact with you. Lots of fun with the audience. But I don't have to prepare a lot. Okay. Also, what I noticed from the comments, my shorts are not necessarily best practices. It's more like ideas, notes, or actually maybe showcases what you can do with Java without any effort. So this is the shorts. It's not necessarily, you should do this way in Java. It's more like, hey, this is an interesting method. Just use that. This is the idea. And by the way, I think the recent days, I found 20 more ideas in shorts, which I even created 2 years ago, and I will record the shorts as well. So there will be, I think it will be never-ending story with shorts. Okay, now first question from Alex Nerd. He asked me, is in Java we have a class thread local. Should we remove thread local variables directly, or is not necessary? As I remember, thread local, so it is necessary. If you don't do this, you get memory leak. And actually, I spent some time in task forces where the thread local was not cleaned up, and then there was a memory leak. So, but you don't have to remove the variables one by one. I think you can just call remove. So just take a look at the Java doc. As I remember, there is thread local remove method. And it just cleans up the contents of the thread local. And yeah, exactly. Thread local class has remove method. Yeah, you have to call it. So and what usually happens, the thread locals are used in interceptors or dynamic proxies, and after the origin method is intercepted, you call remove. Having said that, it is not always necessary to use thread local. What you can do with Quarkus, microprofile, Jakarta EE, Java EE, you can just use request scoped, which request scoped is similar to thread local. What it means is during the invocation, you can store state or variables, whatever you like, and how it works is you annotate a class with request scoped, you inject the class wherever you like, and you can share data via this class or via this instance, not class, and similar to thread local, but nicer to use. Okay, so I hope, Alex Nerd, you're happy. So now back to this. So this talk was interesting because what I think it is absolutely possible to have something like NoOps. So I have to, because it's only one question, so we can spend a little bit more time. What I mean by that. So there was actually an article. If you search for NoOps, you will find it by, I think it was an analyst or researcher. And the idea is, if you're in the cloud, it is possible that the cloud manages by itself. And if you think about this, it is absolutely possible because serverless means there are no servers to maintain. The servers are maintained by the cloud. And think about this: if you consider S3 bucket, right? There is no way. I think it is impossible to maintain S3 or administer or maintain or whatever, or watch an S3 bucket. Lambda comes and goes. DynamoDB is just there. So Route 53, like DNS, is just there. And this is not just AWS on Azure. Similar story. There is, I think it says Blob Storage or Cosmos DB. They are just there, right? So so if you do it correctly, there is nothing to do. What you only have to do is to watch your logs and see where the application is throwing errors. But what cannot happen is that your Java virtual machine runs out of memory. So in theory, it could happen, but only for one call. So if you ship, your Lambda function with, let's say, 32 megs, and it requires per request 33 megs, so then you are in trouble. But what cannot happen, like in interesting referring to Alex Nerd, thread local, right? Imagine Alex just doesn't call remove. So there will be memory leak, but it doesn't matter because the Lambda will run maybe at most for half an hour. So I mean, it will be at most for half an hour warm, and after that it will be completely destroyed. So it means, this is what I meant by NoOps. And what I did in the talk, I explained the serverless ideas. And so I started with infrastructure as code with Java. So we set up everything with Java, so you can watch it. And with CDK Cloud Development Kit. And I used the template, which you will find on my GitHub account. My GitHub account. And this is not this one. This is also one. But what I used in the talk is, and by the way, this is the shorts. It was this one, Quarkus Lambda CDK plain. This is the template which I usually use as a starting point. And but this goes further than that. What I usually do as well is we have a pipeline. What is a pipeline is similar to Jenkins, called code pipeline and code build. If someone checks in something to, let's say, GitHub, the pipeline gets notified. It checks out the code, builds everything, and then destroys, right? So the pipeline is also serverless. So everything is serverless. And if you do that, then there is nothing to maintain, to administer, whatever. Most of my projects nowadays are like that. So, and I got an interesting comment, really good one, from Dempile, and asked me, is this approach specific to AWS, or we could use it on-premise with OpenShift, for example? And so, you could. But what's the main difference between on-premise and the cloud? And I would say the main difference is then if you are in a cloud, and I think all the clouds, AWS started with it. So I think, I don't know whether you remember, as the cloud started, everyone talked about APIs. And the major difference between AWS and on-premises that in the cloud, whatever you do is can be only achieved calling an HTTP API. So you don't see the API because it's hidden behind CloudFormation, CDK, or SDK, but there is an HTTP-based API. And maybe you attended my early talks about cloud and microservices, and it was at 14 years ago, I guess, because it was before Oracle took over Sun. And what Sun had, they had a Sun Cloud, and they never delivered. But what was delivered, they delivered the API specification for the cloud. So you could, provision MySQL database, you can provision a virtual machine, and this was, and the API was open, and it was actually well done. So the API was really good. And so now, if you have the API, then you can automate. Now, on premise, if you run OpenShift, you only have the OpenShift API. But what you cannot do, you cannot, for instance, right, you cannot configure DNS, right, because it's outside of OpenShift. Or what else? Something like Event Bridge, where you can automate the entire cloud around OpenShift, is also impossible. So I would say on-premise, you could use Ansible or similar technology, or Terraform, for instance, to automate the creation and maintenance of OpenShift, which boils down to automating Kubernetes. And for me, Kubernetes is not necessarily cloud native, I have to admit. For me, Kubernetes is a virtual machine, basically, right? So back then, we shipped virtual machines to the cloud and started and stopped virtual machines. And right now, we're starting and stopping Docker containers. They are smaller and faster, but the same concept as virtual machines, I would say. Okay, so what's missing on-premise is an API, an HTTP API, where we can automate everything. If we had such an API, we could write a Java program, which is CDK, to automate the entire cloud, what I actually do in the public cloud. So now, the next thing is serverless. I think on-premise, it makes less sense to use serverless technologies. Why? Because serverless means usually all the services are triggered by events. If there is an event, something happens. After the event, the service goes sleep or gets destroyed. This would be the ideal, right? And even the recently released AWS database, all the connections maintained more or less by Lambda-like technology. So if you call the database, the connection is there, and after that, the connection is it doesn't consume any resources. So if you look at on-premise, so my experience is all my clients, they don't have spare servers. So all the on-premise data centers are overloaded. So what it means is, because there are no spare resources, you cannot just, I think Lambda-like technologies make less sense because they generate more overhead. And in the cloud, for instance, different story. There are millions, maybe even millions of servers. And to launch a Lambda, it is easier to find, an idle server so with Lambda-like or serverless technology, it is easier, or it should be easier, to keep, to prevent cloud to going idle. So I think on-premise, serverless technology makes less sense unless your data center is huge. So if you're running, a huge data center, complete different stories. Then you are absolutely comparable to AWS, Azure, or Oracle Cloud. But if you have a regular data center, I don't understand why serverless, make sense in your data center because your servers have to run all the time, and you pay for the servers already. So why you should play with events and serverless technology? I think the only reasoning would be in this particular case you could share the data center between departments, maybe something like this. But it makes far less sense than in the cloud. So I would say, okay, if you have your own data center and everything is available through HTTP API, and the HTTP API has nice Java abstraction, then you could do similar what I did in the Serverless NoOps on AWS talk for DevOps stage conference. Okay, I hope you got the point. And also interesting, there were lots of alumni in my during my workshop with DynamoDB, which is of course serverless, and some of the attendees already use serverless technology, serverless Java in the cloud. And the conclusion, they use Docker and virtual machines before and switched to serverless. And we had the conversation, and the conclusion was, if you do with Java serverless right, I think you are far ahead of the competition. So this was the interesting, because you only have to focus on business. You can ignore operations mostly, and you can run complicated software with small team and have lots of fun. Okay, now let's. I hope this question or this comment was answered. I will link to the. I will reply to the comment. This was a mistake. So I will reply to the comment later, and by linking to the show. Okay, now. So I have an idea for you shorts. Process Builder. I think I recorded already a short about Process Builder. So pretty sure. So what could be a drawbacks of using Backend-as-a-Service like AppWrite? I don't know AppWrite. Let's see. AppWrite. So what it does, let's see. So build your entire backend with min and scale effortless using AppWrite open source platform. That sounds already interesting. Database function storage, also interesting. So and wow, Oracle, interesting. Why Oracle uses TikTok and so forth. So products. Let's see what they offer. Auth databases, storage functions, and so this looks promising. And 600 euro a month is not much. So this an enterprise custom. So I never used AppWrite, I have to say, but for $15 a month, what you get is 300 gigs bandwidth, which is a lot. This is also 3.5 million execution is not much. So for instance, Lambda is 1 million is free, and if you do something more evolved, I think the 3.5 millions are gone fast. 200K monthly use is a lot. Organization roles, email support, and so forth. So the pricing seems interesting. 600 euro a month. Unlimited seats, network logs. The question is why I don't get network logs for developer, because I mean, activity logs means I don't get logging here. This is strange with the logging. Custom backend policy and priority support. What I would like to see is SDKs. So first downside, of course, there is no Java SDK, right? Server, no Java, but Swift is interesting. And so I would say this AppWrite, what I would see is first, open source is great. The question is, okay, let's say I'm using this as a service and then go bankrupt. The question is, can I run the entire service on premise? So is it possible? So the function API, I would like to see. Okay, this is the management API web. So I would say I never heard about AppWrite. Maybe they are huge, but never heard about them. So downside is, of course, you are completely dependent on them. You would also be completely depending on AWS. But if you consider, for instance, the Quarkus CDK Lambda plane, this function here, if you take a look, it looks like, greetings resource, like my 20 years old Java code. It means in this particular case, I am depending on the AWS Lambda as a runtime, but my code is my old code. So we migrated lots of projects from Jakarta EE, or no Jakarta, it is also Jakarta EE, from application servers to serverless, and it works. So and in the case of AppWrite, we have to look how to do that, right? So this is a little bit more effort. So I mean, if I would be forced to use the AWS native Lambda API, would be not as nice as this one. So and by the way, Azure functions the same. I could just deploy Quarkus as Azure function and it will work. But I'm pretty sure I cannot deploy Quarkus as AppWrite function and expect to work, right? The next thing is, Prakar, AppWrite looks impressive. So for me, so just I try, to provide you a balanced view. So the next thing is S3 bucket. The S3 API became more or less standard. I would say everyone implements the S3. So usually if I have Lambda, this is my Lambda code, I could just use the bucket here and I would be complete standard. And AWS is the largest one. So the question is why I should pick something different to AWS. So this is the interesting question, because I'm thinking a lot, I'm on my project at AWS, so my client wanted to have it. So, but if I would start a project right now, why I should not use AWS? Because if you think about this, I have my old Java code. I can run it effortless on Quarkus. I can automate the entire infrastructure with Java and Maven, which I did for years. And S3 became a standard, and most of my projects right now are AWS Lambda and S3. And DynamoDB is absolutely proprietary, but I don't know, 10 years ago maybe, I delivered courses on NoSQL, and we started with Dynamo paper, and most of the databases are based on Dynamo, and DynamoDB is also based, but it's not the Dynamo paper implementer is based on the Dynamo paper. So another standard. So I would say this is what I also liked, right? So back then, Sun Microsystem invented Java, so I stick to Java. Now AWS more or less invented cloud, so they were the first, and these APIs I'm using are stable, and I'm happy. And the next one would be Azure, and what I also like is Oracle Cloud, for instance, also interesting. And also, and this is Prakar. What you should also look at is another company, really interesting one, and the company is called Cloudflare. And why they are interesting is because they don't have the Java functions, but what they have is they have really nice S3 implementation, and I think they are the biggest competitor to AWS right now, I would say. And so I would say, Prakar, if you're happy with AppWrite and you write for you, just pick it and use it. I'm only thinking what happens when AppWrite disappears. And this happened a lot already. There were lots of very popular backend providers which basically disappear or were bought by another company. So, and you can ask me what happens when AWS disappears. And the answer would be lots of projects are based on AWS. So if AWS disappears, I think this is the least problem, right? Because then lots of companies have trouble. So this is like picking AWS is like picking IBM a few years ago. So this is my point of view. Yeah. And but if Prakar is also depending what you are doing, right? So I'm not building my own startup. I'm advising my client. And let's imagine I would say, hey, AppWrite look cool, and we build a solution for my client, and this AppWrite disappears. So my client asked me, why you picked AppWrite? And I have answered, because it's cool. This is the wrong answer, no? And in AWS or Azure or even Oracle, they are big companies. And if the SDK or Google Cloud, I forgot to mention GCP. So Google Cloud becomes more and more viable. Having said that, in my projects, is mostly AWS is the leader and Azure is the second, and Google Cloud is rare. But I would pick, for instance, AI, right? So this is also hard right now, because I would say AWS is strong with Claude. This is the Anthropic. Microsoft is OpenAI, but they are not that happy with OpenAI. I would say they try, to implement their own models. So this is like they love and hate. My impression. OpenAI at the same time, right? And Google Cloud with Vertex, with Gemini, which is great model, is also an interesting alternative. So I would say it's the same story, right? If you just consider AI, it's also hard to pick one, right? So I stick with AWS because most of the projects are AWS, and Anthropic is great. But I would say Gemini looks more and more promising, right? So let's see what happens there, because not to forget, Google was the first with an entire AI story, and they forgot, or they were too cautious, and then OpenAI happened, right? Okay, now, perfect. Kaspar asked me, cool is good marketing. Cool is not a bread and butter, but is needed like pepper. Yeah. Absolutely, Kaspar. I hope I told you. So, yeah, I'm absolutely with you. So, yeah. Then, is backend going to be replaced by generative AI in future? What are your views on Spring AI? I'm not use Spring a lot, because Quarkus is faster, and we save money with Quarkus on AWS with serverless functions. And I spend a lot of time with LangChain4j. It's also what we did in the workshop. And the LangChain4j is based on the origin LangChain, and the committer for LangChain4j works on Quarkus. And is backend going to be replaced by generative AI in the future? What are your views on Spring AI? So Spring AI, no idea. LangChain4j could be interesting, because it is, for me, hexagonal architecture, an ESB, enterprise service bus, where you can implement your business logic in the middle, and you can call out different LLMs. So this is, and it also solves lots of plumbing, like, and there is an easy rack, so you can very easily implement rack and the LLM. So I would say this is LangChain4j, for me, is the leader. They were the first, and it is nicely integrated with Quarkus, which means if you like, you can compile the entire LangChain4j with Quarkus. There's an extension to a GraalVM image. Yeah. So now, is backend going to be replaced by generative AI in the future? So I used the LLMs all the time, because I'm really curious. And I think what prediction, right? This generative AI is more like Ruby on Rails, what happened to Java and Ruby on Rails, right? This was as I remember, 2006 timeframe. So Ruby on Rails happened, and the question is, it was, okay, Java is dead. We don't need type safety anymore. Dynamic duck typing is perfect. You can move fast, and we don't need types because we write unit tests. So what happened was, the tests were written less than expected, and lots of projects had really maintenance problems with that, and some were migrated back to Java afterwards. So now, LLM, I would say similar situation. So right now, everyone talks, okay, we can move faster. And I would say you can be very productive with LLMs if you are really careful and read what LLM generates, and then constantly improve the outcome. So if you just accept what LLM is doing, I would say after a few iteration, your entire project is no more maintainable, which is good for me. I'm a consultant. What I expect is in 1 to 2 years, we get a huge boost of projects, or of requests to help to understand the code. Because I would say LLMs are code generators, which works, I would say, right now maybe 85% of the time, and 15% of the time they're entirely wrong. And they generate code which could be, also if you train them, it could look like your code, but there are still mistakes. I would say using LLMs reasonably right now is only if you understand the entire generated code, which means I think it is completely wrong for junior developers to use LLMs in production. For learning, fine, but in production system, if you think about this crazy idea, for instance, if I would run Python, right? So I have only a very, very little. I think I never written a Python app. So if I would write, I would learn Python, I would never use LLMs, because if LLM would generate Python code for me, I couldn't tell you whether it works or not, or what it actually does. So after a few iteration, I would be completely lost. And even if the program would run, I would be a really bad feeling why it runs. What I will do, I would try to read books or whatever, to read or tutorials to understand what happened. So I would say, LLMs, I don't think they will replace anything. And my observations are a little bit plateau right now. So the LLMs get better and better. And the best one, O3, is crazy, but also crazy expensive. So I would say what you also will happen, maybe young developers right now will only know LLMs and know how to generate code which does something, but they will forget about the foundation. And if you know the foundation and know LLMs, I think in a year or two, you will be highly requested on the market. Let's see, right? This is now recorded in the Airhacks episode 130. Let's see, 100 episodes back, which I forgot actually. I have to look at, find 100 episodes back, and the time machine, and see whether we were right or not, right? So, how much time Quarkus Lambda with JPA takes to load in cold start? So usually, if you do nothing with Quarkus and JPA, doesn't matter. So microprofile is below 3 seconds. If you use snap start, it is maybe 1 second, 1.5 seconds. And if you buy provisioned concurrency, is a few milliseconds. So this is, and GraalVM is even faster. So I'm speaking about JVM. So in most enterprise applications, we just run stock Quarkus. We never use JPA, not because it's slow to start. It's just because the RDS, or the relational databases, are slow. So that's, not slow, expensive. Not slow, they are not slow, they are fast, they are expensive. So, sorry, not slow, expensive. Expensive to run and expensive to maintain, backup, and stuff like that. So, we had it on the show already, a small Postgres database can cost you, or will cost you, starting with, on all clouds mostly, starting with 300 euros, usually 600 euros a month. So this is why, like, AppWrite was actually a big deal, or a good deal, not a good and big deal. Okay. Now, let's see. Airhacks TV episode 30. 30. 31. Where's the 30? So I actually forgot to look up. It never happened. So the first time, the time machine, the first episode of let's see, past shows. So, hi Adam, I want to learn Quarkus, but do I need to have knowledge of Jakarta EE before start? Absolutely not. So you can learn Quarkus and you don't need to care about Jakarta EE or microprofile at all. So what I do, just if in my Quarkus project, I just look at the imports, and I prefer or Eclipse or Jakarta EE imports, and try to not use too much or Quarkus. So this is my way. So if you if you learn Quarkus and look at the tutorials, prefer Orc Eclipse microprofile or Jakarta EE imports. Why that? Because this standard Jakarta EE and microprofile are implemented not only by Quarkus, by other OpenLiberty and so forth. So more people are maintaining this, and there are lots of Quarkus extensions which are only maintained by a small group of people, and there is a buzz factor, which means if the people disappear, what do you do with the extension, right? So now we need the 30th. So I never did this. This is the AXTV 30th edition to look at the. This was 100 question and answer. So let's take a look at this. This is how it. This was a long time ago. So let's see here from my blog, and these were the topics. So let's go through the. It was the August, May 29th, and the year was, what was the year? It was 2000. This was 8 years ago exactly. And so what I got asked was lightning fast Java EE and Java 9 releases. Yeah, back then people were concerned about the future of Java EE 8 years ago, and the problem back then was Oracle worked on Helidon and similar projects, and all the engineers worked on this project, and no one worked on Jakarta EE back then, or Java EE spec. So what I did back then is I created a Doclens project. It's still around on my GitHub project, and what it does. The Doclens was I created Dockifies for most of the application servers. I maintain them from time to time, but because I spend lots of time serverless right now, somehow I don't maintain a lot the Doclens project. How to run JMS servers. Back then, I got lots of questions regarding JMS and MDB and AMQP. And this is the same how to run Kafka servers, right? So running JMS servers is very hard. And I would say not JMS servers, running all servers which are messaging servers are hard, because at the end of the day, it is a singleton which is distributed. So usually what you have to do is there's one server which is the leader, and all other servers has to follow the leader, and which means is you have to set it up, and there's lots of problems, split brain problem and so forth. So this is why cloud is nicer, because it runs the servers for you. And I prefer not even, if you go to the cloud, you can run, for instance, Kafka, manage Kafka. I try to not to use it. Why? Because managed Kafka is also expensive, and if you use let's say SNS or SQS is completely managed by AWS. I don't care about the cluster servers at all. And message-driven beans in AMQP. And wait a sec, maybe we find the origin questions. This is So this is how to use MDB to listen to AMQP queues. Old question, we can forget it. So, by the way, if you are new to the show, what I'm doing right now, I'm looking back, 100 episodes to the 30th episode, and see, what changed in the last 8 years. So AMQP, so I think still from time to time I get questioned to know whether to use it or not. And what are message-driven beans? Message-driven beans are basically lambdas listening to events. So message-driven beans are very similar to lambdas listening to SQS or SNS events. Okay, so how to implement it? So I would use the JCA connector back then, and right now I would AMQP. If I have to use it, I would use the native AMQP listener on Quarkus, for instance, and I would prefer SQS, SNS, or Kinesis. Why? Because it's managed, so I don't have to care about that. So Tonda asked me 8.5 years ago, where do you keep a specific configuration, URL credentials, and so forth. So right now we do this in environment. This is the and we configure this with CDK, Cloud Development Kit, and or on Azure, the language is called Bicep. But my project right now is AWS. So it's easier to talk about AWS. And there is a system manager where you can save, encrypted stuff, and is injected to the environment, and it just works. Stress test WebSocket endpoints. So there's a JMeter. I've wrote even a stress test, a stress generator. I think I call it Socketfire or something like this on my GitHub account. Let's see, Adam Bean Web Sockets stress generator. Hell sockets. Yeah. Hell sockets. I actually will have to look at this, whether it still is working. So it is even older. It is 9 years old. So Hell sockets. Actually, cool name. So Hell sockets, Autobahn test suite. So let's see whether it is around. You see, it's gone. Now Ghost asked me which JDK to use for build Docklands. And which JDK do you use to build Docklands, or which JDK I used back then? I think back then I preferred to use Oracle JDK because it was, for me, the standard. It was the Sun JDK, and now it depends. Sometimes I use Azul, and if I'm in AWS, I use Corretto, and it turned out that Corretto is one of the most popular JDKs nowadays, which is surprising. Never thought something like this will happen. But Azul systems also great JDK. It really depends. If you do something with SAP, there is a SAP machine JDK. There are lots of JDKs nowadays. Okay. So context service, concurrent context service. Recently we used that. And what Jakarta context? What you can do is you can with context service, you can pass context between threads, more or less. DTO in boundaries. So this is, the question was too long, so come back. So what I stress test NAS using DTOs as data encapsulation pattern. So what I will say right now is, back then I suggested JSON and JSONP, and right now I could also say, okay, Java records are actually great data holders. Personal opinion about Angular, React, and Co. So interesting what I said back then. I guess 9 years ago, I'm not sure, but right now we use web components and web standards everywhere. I don't use any frameworks anymore. Manipulating data in JPA entity accessors. Hopefully what I said back then is that, and by the way, we had a Brazilian a listener to the show who actually listened to all the episodes and so know what is the difference back then, what I said back then and right now, and he rewatched all the episodes, which was crazy. So I still have to send him a T-shirt. But okay, so I would say right now with the DTOs, just use Java record or JSONP. JSONB binding depends how complex not how complex, how many versions you have to maintain of the API at the same time. So how complex is the versioning scheme? This is exactly. And JSONP is like hash map. JSONB is like a Java class. And Java records by Quarkus, for instance, get automatically serialized if you send them back. So manipulating data in JPA accessors is a bad idea. Accessor means getters and setters. I always did it in business methods. So storing data in secure cookies. This is, I think, right now we use JSON Web Tokens, which could be considered a secure cookie. So there's nothing unusual. Generating large PDF documents. Web components, you see. So web components lit HTML is a way to go. So and 8 years ago was already a question. So we already had that. Secure cookie in JSON Web Token. So we store the data in JSON Web Token all the time. Lot of PDE being generated. So PDF, not PDE. PDF being generated. Right now, we have to do research again. So PDF box maybe, Jasper reports. There are lots of libraries. The problem is lots of PDF. So the question is what it means, right? So memory constraints on how big can be the PDF. So let's see. And a Java project of the month. So what I picked, Java project of the month, I don't even know. Interesting. Current state of the ESBs. And by the way, John Hogan, still friend of the show. And what is the current state of enterprise server bus? I think they never took off, but having said that, for me, the LangChain 4J is almost like an enterprise service bus. So I'm in the middle, I implement business logic, and then LLMs are around me. So, yeah, and, oh, by the way, Mr. Shy Guy, it's incredible, 8 years ago, he attended the show, also my workshop, in December, and we had a great time. So I also asked good questions. So I think we covered now the time machine. So now back to chat. Sure. Microsoft Java. Just go with Quarkus. It's really easy to learn, and try just to prefer Jakarta EE and microprofile API over proprietary Quarkus API. That's all. Then Casper asked me. Is to keep all logic in the one fed lambda. Yes, this is what I do. Yes. We can have one fed lambda with Quarkus, and it is very possible to keep it warm for 20 euros a month. And yeah, exactly, Casper. Yeah, just exactly, yeah. I've used the Dynamo. They're good and cheap for key value access, but it's not good if you need a list or an aggregation. For aggregation, even AWS recommends Postgres. I don't think. I would say AWS recommends nothing. But DynamoDB aggregation. So what do it means by aggregation? So I would say DynamoDB is absolutely not. DynamoDB, CassandraDB, React, and all similar databases. React, I think, is out of business already, but all similar key value stores databases are not very good for ad hoc queries and reports. So this is the downside. But if you have an API and would like to expose the API, DynamoDB and Cassandra and all the others will just work. And how they are working, basically, the main idea of all the NoSQL databases is the following. The key comprises two sub-keys, so it's composite keys. And the one key is hash and the other is called sort key, or major or minor keys are different names in different databases. And the idea is with the first key, the hash key, you go to the server. So the hash key identifies the server and the sort key allows you to refine the search. And with that, with this trick, what you can do, you can very fast queries. What you could do is imagine the hash key is the ID of Airhacks TV, like the show ID, 131, first show, second show, and third show, and so forth. And the second key we could prefix with, let's say, viewers, your viewer name, like for instance, Prakar Mishra. So I would just, use Prakar, remove the space, and just use that as a secondary key. So I have attendees hash and your ID, and then I could have comments and so forth. And then I could, for instance, if I just pick 130th show, I would get with one query all the one-to-n relations in one shot, and in a few milliseconds. It is not doable with it is doable with relation database, but it's a lot harder to do. So, and then if I would be only interested in comments, I would search for show 130, and the sort key starts with comments hash. So then we get all the comments, attendees hash, all the attendees. Yeah, you know where it's going. Okay, cool. What will happen? So I got the idea for the next iteration of the LLM Gen AI patterns architecture and use cases with Java, because there were already 2 workshops with LLMs, and we covered first the very basics. The last time it was no more that basic, And I think the next time we can focus on use cases and implement an app with LLMs. And this will happen in July because before then I have no time. And by the way, all the workshops in December were almost sold out. So if you're interested in relational database, what was published today is an podcast with Alvaro, and he is the CEO, but he's also Java developer. And what he did, he created product Ongress and Stagress, where you can run Postgres on premises in more or less serverless fashion, I would say, or no serverless, NoOps fashion. It just managed. So really interesting solution. And the cool story is it is Kubernetes based, but the complete Kubernetes orchestration happens with Quarkus and Java. So this was published today. So if you like, listen to this. And to Microsoft Java, if you're interested in Quarkus, there are lots of Quarkus episodes here. So you see a lot of Quarkus on the podcast. So if you have some time, maybe interesting to you. Now, Kasper asked me a question. We need to process a message in Kafka, but we need to wait for 10 minutes before processing it. Is there a way to wait 10 minutes before processing a message? In the end, we used cron jobs. If the message arrives, what you could do. So, Kasper, if you have a stock Quarkus or Java application, you could consume the message, right? But the problem is, if you consume the message, it's already gone. Not gone, it is already processed. So what you could do, you could remember the index or whatever in Kafka, because it's, in Kafka it's not as bad because the message doesn't disappear. So it is easier. So in Kafka, you could just, consume the message, and then you can set up an one-shot timer and for 10 minutes. So, and this timer gets triggered and the message gets processed. And in the cloud, you could use, for instance, Event Bridge Scheduler to set up, via the API, the 10 minutes timer, which is persistent. And then the message is going to be processed. And I'm not sure whether MicroProfile, there is some long-running actions, LRA in MicroProfile. So you could use that, but it also stores the state somewhere. So I would say with Kafka, you already have the state, so you can absolutely consume the message and do something 10 minutes later. But you cannot do this in Lambda. In Lambda, it would be like, create an event bridge trigger, and then the Lambda gets called. So this would be one idea. Just for 130 show, you would get. What if you need a list of Airhacks shows? List of Airhacks shows would be a full table scan. It means it would be a scan operation, so you can do nothing about that. So you have to pay for the entire scan. So the method is called scan, and it will scan. What you can always do with DynamoDB is to scan and filter, but it's expensive. So but absolutely doable. Prakar, thank you for the question. And what I like is challenging questions, but sometimes it's hard during the show. So to answer long questions. So if possible, but you get better and better. You saw 8 years ago I got half-page questions, and now I get very great single-sentence questions, which are easier to read interactively. Okay, thank you all. Enjoy 2025. I wish you all the best, and see you next month with the next Airhacks. And I will try next week to to create the gist for the next one, so I get more questions up front. It was a great show, great audience. Thank you for all the questions, and see you next month in February, not January, February. Bye.